You're listening to an IACP podcast, www.iacprx.org. This is Scott Maitland, your Director of Communications and Publications for the International Academy of Compounding Pharmacists, and I want to welcome you to a special edition of the IACP podcast. We have a new section in Compounding Matters Quarterly called The Personalities of Personalized Care. In our current issue, we reached out to our student member, Loren Kirk. Loren is a pharmacy student at East Tennessee State University, and I met him several years ago at IACP's Compounders on Capitol Hill when he was interning for PCAB. I caught up with Loren right before the APHA trade show in San Diego. Loren, I want to welcome you to the show, and I have the added benefit of not just being a colleague of yours, but I'm also your friend, and I noticed on Facebook that you posted this picture that kind of got the whole conversation started. Since we're on a podcast, let me kind of describe the picture for you. It was Loren on a horse in polo gear. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that photo and what was going on?
So I've ridden horses competitively in multiple different disciplines since I was 7. And oftentimes what I've experienced recently, whenever I would try and escape pharmacy school or really try and get pharmacy school off my mind, I would go out to the barn and I wouldn't be able to necessarily escape that. I wouldn't be able to forget about my to-do list or all of the things that I needed to study before an exam. So even on horseback, what I used to be able to experience was just this escape where I didn't have to think about anything except me and the horse and what was going on underneath me and what was going on with the horse, how fast they were going, how slow they were going, what they were looking at. But like I said, it became it has now kind of become autopilot where I'm no longer focused on the horse and I really focused on what I was supposed to be doing instead of what I was actually doing right then and there on the back of a horse. So my solution to that was to try something new. So I had a break here for spring break, and I called a guy, the coach of the North Carolina polo team, and asked him if I could have a few lessons, and he offered a spot. I went out and I took my first 2 polo lessons. Polo is, in my mind, attractive for 2 reasons, because it's something new. I haven't tried it before, and 2, it adds the element of a completely different element that you're hitting a ball from atop a horse, which is unique to really any other horse discipline as well. So there's not really many other ways of riding that involve hitting a ball into a goal from the top of a horse.
Loren, I think this is brilliant. You took something that you love, but it was becoming stale, so you mixed it up. And you found a way to revitalize it. I think our listeners are going to take a lot from this because pharmacy can get that way. It can start to become monotonous, whether you're compounding in a lab or behind the counter, or even if you're doing patient consults. It can all become tedious and you can lose your passion for it. One of the great things about pharmacy today is that it offers you variety. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, I met you when you were interviewing for PCAB at Compounders on Capitol Hill. What other things have you been up to that have been part of your student career?
So since my time at the Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board, I've really begun to focus on the broader aspects of pharmacy and really to expand myself into those. So I've worked primarily with the American Pharmacists Association Academy of Student Pharmacists, where at this point right now I am 3 weeks away from finishing my year-long term as the APHA ASP Speaker of the House. In that role, I am one of 5 student pharmacists that represent over 34,000 student pharmacists across the country. So it's an honor and a privilege and quite a heavy responsibility to be able to really represent those individuals and really be a facilitator of all of the policy and advocacy activities that APHA ASP has to offer student pharmacists. I kind of got started within the policy and advocacy realm whenever my chapter at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee, really began to approach collaborative practice within Tennessee and how the State Pharmacy Practice Act did not include provisions for pharmacists to be able to collaborate with other healthcare providers. So my school began to really take that on as a larger issue, and I got involved with that, and it rolled on from there to where I became very interested and really enjoyed the policy and advocacy side of pharmacy. And from then on, I pursued a regional position with the APHA-ASP and finally was elected last year to the APHA-ASP Speaker of the House position.
So what's next for you?
Well, that is a very good question, Scott. At this point, my next step is to finish graduating. It has always been the constant pursuit, but I have a lot of unique experiences that I'm very excited about, with plans for my fourth and final year as a student pharmacist in that rotation year. So I'm quite excited to home in on those experiences and make sure I get the most out of those over the next year. But that doesn't mean I won't be involved extracurricularly with both writing as well as with APHA-ASP. I'll likely seek a few more positions and see where I can be helpful to student pharmacists in both facilitating their policy and advocacy activities, as well as more empowering them to get involved within the profession.
Loren, I want to thank you for being on our podcast show, and I have one final question for you. What would you say to fellow pharmacy students who are out there and maybe struggling with their course load or trying to be active and have a personal life?
I would have to say the one piece of advice is to learn to prioritize. There are times when a therapy exam is the priority. There are times when finishing a compounding lecture or finishing reviewing a lecture in order to take a quiz, and that's the priority. There are times when working with a group member in order to complete an assignment for class is the priority. There are also times when you are the priority, when you've been studying all night and ultimately you're the priority at the end of the night whenever you need to get rest and go into the exam fresh. So learning those priorities is really going to be able to allow you to strike a balance within life. And by no means have I found the balance, and by no means have I not struggled with finding that balance. But the designation of priorities is really what has allowed me to find some degree of success as I've worked through finding that balance within life.
Hey, Loren, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. And listeners, thank you for listening in. Do you have a question, a comment, maybe a suggestion? It's not a problem at all. Just give us a call at the IACP podcast at 713-730-9043. And be sure to check out this interview in print in the latest issue of Compounding Matters Quarterly. This is Scott Maitland, the Director of Communications and Publications, and here's to the health of your pharmacy.